Good evening and welcome to Signs of the Times. We're broadcasting live from the studios of Media 1, Channel 12, Community TV, and on behalf of everyone who assists in the productions of Signs of the Times, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Signs of the Times is a program designed to serve as a forum of discussion of the social, economic, and political conditions of the world and local communities. The panelists which appear on Signs of the Times are individuals who, despite their diversity, do have common bonds which link them together, and that is our study of history and our love and concern for all humanity. I'd like to thank you again for joining us tonight, and we have a real important show planned for you tonight. The title of tonight's show is The Last Four World Empires Upon the Earth. Now, all we've heard throughout the past year is that the return of Christ is imminent. What we want to do tonight is to share with you the prophecies of Daniel and the prophecies of Revelations as it relates to the last four kingdoms on the earth to determine whether or not Christ's return is imminent or whether it's a ways off. So we hope you enjoy tonight's show, and I'm Tamar Israel, and with me tonight is Miss Samara Israel. Welcome for the first time to Signs of the Times. Miss Deborah Israel and Miss Johanna Israel. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, we've heard a lot about people sitting and waiting for the return of the Messiah, especially since the time of the stir of Y2K. Well, there are certain things that has to occur before the Messiah can come back to reclaim this earth and rule as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So what this show should do for you is to make you question whether or not, first of all, have these things happened? And second of all, if they have, why isn't Christ returned to the earth and why isn't he ruling? So, somebody tell me, the first really important prophecy of Daniel was in Daniel chapter 2. Tell me about the significance of Daniel chapter 2 and how he saw these last four world empires.
Well, at this time, the house of Judah was in captivity in Babylon under the king Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay.
And Nebuchadnezzar had had a dream that he couldn't interpret, and he had called for his magicians and his kings to try to interpret this dream for him, and none of them were able to do that.
Okay.
So he had called upon Daniel, who was from the house of Judah, and Yahweh had blessed him to be able to interpret dreams. And Daniel, in chapter 2, starting with verse 31, let Nebuchadnezzar know, he said, "You, O king, saw and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you in front, and the form of it was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, its breasts and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of brass, its legs of iron, its feet part of iron and part of clay." So what he showed him was the image of a man, where the gold represented Nebuchadnezzar as the gold, and the silver represented the Mede-Persians, which are today the Russians.
Okay, I think we have it on the screen now. So tell us again, the head of gold was
The Babylonian Empire,
okay,
under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar. And then we had the silver, which were the Mede-Persians, or the Russians, which was the first Gentile rule that our people had.
Okay.
And then following that was brass, or the Greeks. And following that was the iron, the legs, which were the Romans. And then we had the toes, which were the iron and the clay mixture.
Okay, all right. So this image that Nebuchadnezzar saw portrayed the last four rulers.
Right.
And Daniel told him that he was that first, that head of gold. So three would follow.
That's right.
Correct? Anybody got anything else about that? Because history shows that these four empires follow.
Well, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and also Daniel had a dream.
Okay.
In this dream, the symbolism was a little different than what Nebuchadnezzar's dream was. And this is in Daniel 7.
Okay.
And it says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and a vision of his head upon his bed. And he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, and beheld, four winds of heaven strode upon the great sea. Four great beasts came from the sea, diverse one from another." So the four beasts are the four empires that Nebuchadnezzar also dreamed about. Okay, the first empire was like a lion. You know, and a lion today is called the king of all animals.
Okay, let's see if we can get this picture on the screen. We have a picture of this symbology in Daniel.
Okay, the first is like a lion and had an eagle's wing, and I beheld until the wings thereof was plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and a man stood upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Okay, the second world empire was the Mede-Persian Empire, and that particular empire was representative of a bear. And it says, and behold, another beast, is second like to a bear, and it rose up again on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, of it between the teeth of it, and it says, thus unto it arise, devour much flesh. So this was the Russian Empire,
Okay.
the Mede-Persian Empire.
All right.
Okay. Then the third was the Greek under Alexander. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So the leopard was Alexander, and the 4 heads were the 4 generals after Alexander died. The kingdom was divided into 4 provinces. Okay, so that's what that beast represents. Then we have the Roman Empire. And after this I saw the night vision, behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke into pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So this particular beast was different than all the other beasts. This beast was dreadful, and this was the Roman Empire. So the same dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, Daniel had the dream, but his dream was represented in an animal shape, where Nebuchadnezzar was more like in metal.
Of a man.
Of a man.
Now, in both these depictions, what I see is that the great image of the man went from gold down to clay and iron.
Right.
So it's deteriorating in strength. And then again with the Daniel 7, with the depiction as animals, the strength deteriorated as well. You started with a lion, and you ended with something that you didn't know what it was, some great ferocious beast that had power, but still deteriorating in the strength, because the king of the jungle is the lion. So let me read this to you and tell me what you guys think. It says, this is in Daniel chapter 7, verse 17 through 18. It says, these great beasts, the ones that you just explained, which are 4 kings. See, the Bible interprets its own interpretation. And that's why Peter said, the Bible is not of your private interpretation. Holy men spoke as they were moved by the Spirit of Yahweh. And here Daniel is telling us that these images that we saw are truly 4 kings that will arise out of the earth. Listen to this, though. It says, but the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, which these 4 kings ruled out of the earth, correct? Right. And possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Jonathan, tell us how important that is, that the saints is going to take over this kingdom. And we've already said that this was the Babylonian kingdom, the Mede-Persian kingdom, the Grecian Empire, and the Roman Empire. What's the significance of that?
Well, certainly the saints are truly going to take over this kingdom, but first you have to follow the genealogy, you have to follow the history of what has happened. Because just as my sisters have spoken, the first, that head of gold, being that reign of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean or Shemitic king, if you follow that, he was the first one to come into Jerusalem, and he actually destroyed Jerusalem. He took out all the holy vessels. He took out everything out of there. He destroyed the temple. And he caused much pain and hardship for the Jews. He also took our people into captivity, so we were exiled out of our land, and we had to go into Babylon, where we were servants. And this is not new information, though, because if you go into the prophet Jeremiah, he prophesied this many times before it actually happened. I want to read that for you. That's in Jeremiah 25. 25 and starting at 11. And this, Yahweh said this was going to come upon our people simply because we weren't keeping his ways. We weren't doing as we should have been doing in the first place. Verse 11. And this whole land, speaking on Israel, speaking on Jerusalem, shall be a desolation and astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And that's exactly how long our people were exiled before the next king came along and allowed us to return. And it shall come to pass, when 70 years are accomplished, that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation saith Yahweh, for their iniquity, and the land of the Chaldeans will make it perpetual desolation. And I will bring upon that land all my words which I have pronounced against it, even all that is written in this book. And we'll skip down to 14. For many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of them also, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and according to the works of their own hands. So for what the group of Nebuchadnezzar's, his empire did, they were recompensed for what they did, taking Yahweh's holy things, destroying his temple and everything else. But truly, our people suffered in the meantime. We certainly suffered, and we suffered greatly under all of the empires, some less than others. But in this one, certainly we did. And this particular empire did not end until shortly after Nebuchadnezzar died, and I think it was his son or his grandson. Right. That was the point where he saw the writing on the wall. He was they were having a party. He was having a party one evening. And now his grandson knew that his father had previously not listened to Yahweh and boasted upon himself that he was king, but Yahweh truly made him king. And because of what Nebuchadnezzar had boasted, Yahweh sent him out into the wilderness for 7 years to act and eat as a beast. Right. And so at the very end, he truly knew that Yahweh was the true God, the God of gods, and he even said so. But even knowing all of this, his grandson went ahead anyway and did the exact same thing. In front of all of his family and friends, he had a large party going on, and they took these holy vessels out of the temple of Yah. They were drinking out of them, which is like it's amazing to even think that he could have that type of gall. But he was doing that. So, I mean, obviously something was going to come behind that. So they were drinking out of these vessels, and then he saw on the wall, he saw a hand writing on the wall, and he couldn't understand what this hand had written. And again, just like previously his grandfather had done before, he searched for a magician or soothsayer or someone to be able to find out, interpret this, and he couldn't. Of course, once again, because Daniel was still there as a servant there, high in power, but still a servant, he was able to interpret this. And at that point, he understood that this kingdom was going to be ripped from him. Right. And it was truly ripped from him that evening. So when the 70 years. At the 70 years. So it's really ironic how Yah's ways just, if a person looks historically and doesn't really look at the scriptures, they'll say, oh, well, this is, such a coincidence. But it's not. Just like you said, it happened after 7 years when Yah already had Jeremiah to prophesy. And then also, he was taken from him because he did just what his grandfather had done, which had boasted himself. So, it's pretty amazing when you look at the background in these empires.
You brought out a good point, and what I think I heard is that regardless of these four world empires, the major piece of this was what was happening to the Hebrew Israelites and how the Hebrew Israelites intertwined in these four great empires. Tell us a little bit more about Nebuchadnezzar building a golden image and what happened with our people at that time. Devorah?
Well, during that time, Nebuchadnezzar, like you said, built this golden image. And all the province was supposed to fall down at one particular time to worship this image. And what happened was Daniel and the other Hebrew brothers, they refused to do this. They're not going to serve anybody else but the God of Israel, the true and living God. So what happened is that when Nebuchadnezzar built this golden image, and he had everybody to fall down and worship him, the word went out in the town that these Hebrew Israelites were not, falling down to worship them. So he had them thrown into prison. Okay, so with Nebuchadnezzar doing this is sort of like with this last empire that's going to be coming on the face of this earth now, where it's this one world order where everyone is supposed to be worshiping this, will have one religion, and everyone is supposed to worship this one God, who is Satan, and they're supposed to fall down and worship him. So it's like a parallel something that we're getting ready to go into in the last days, and something that Nebuchadnezzar went through during his reign when everybody fell down to worship him. So when they did that, and the Hebrew brothers, Daniel, they refused to. They threw them in jail, and
actually threw them in a fire
furnace. And the angel, they sat around. It was like a picnic to them. They sat around to watch these people burn in this furnace. So one of the guards says, didn't you just throw 3 people inside? And I see 4 people standing inside the furnace. And it was an angel. And the angel put protection over Yahweh's people. So to me, the key to that is that if you serve the true living God and you're a saint, because you asked the question about before, how would the saints overtake, these the kingdom or whatever. If you're a saint and you worship Yahweh with your whole heart and your soul, and you will not put anybody before Him, this is what He will do for you. He will protect you from anything that's around you. So this is what happened with Nebuchadnezzar, with that with everyone worshiping the beast.
See, the problem is no one knows who the nation of Israel is anymore.
Right.
There are imposters in our land, and although we are here in slavery, not knowing who we are, the world still revives around our history. It did then, and it does now. And the prize, the reason for Christ's return to destroy this final Babylon is because of us, because of our captivity, that we've gone through these 4 empires. So Christ has a mission when He returns, and that's He told us about these 4 world empires so that Daniel would know what will befall your people in the latter days. So now we have to live that whole thing out. We are in the Roman Empire, or the 10 toes of the Roman Empire, but still we have one more thing to go, and that's them reviving that Roman Empire and them ruling with one king, one religion, one currency for 3.5 years. Then His return is imminent. But we haven't had that yet, even though the New World Order is very close. They have not revived the whole earth under one rule. Like when the Caesars ruled, they ruled everyone. When Nebuchadnezzar ruled, he ruled everyone. So we haven't had that yet. Let's get back into the next empire, which is the Mede-Persian Empire. And again, John has stated that this is the first time our people had been exiled into a foreign land as captives, which is significant in that that head of gold empire. What happened with the Mede-Persian Empire? Tell me a little bit about that one. The Mede-Persian Empire was the arms of silver, and also depicted as the bear in Revelation 7. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, with the second empire that you were speaking of, that was headed by Cyrus the Great. And I think it was spoken that he was the first of the Prophetic or the European background to come into power at that point. And it was him that overthrew that grandson of Nebuchadnezzar that night. Okay. And now, this Cyrus the Great, he was under this rule, our people waxed a lot fatter than other rules, because Yahweh had actually even prophesied him prior to his coming on the scene anyway, because Cyrus truly tried to know Yahweh. He allowed our people to return into Jerusalem, and he even sent money and he sent treasures with our people to be able to rebuild. He promoted the rebuilding of our tabernacle, which was destroyed in the previous empire. So he not only sent our people back, but he sent with them all the sacred things that were in the temple and everything else, and tried to promote this, and also promoted our people to continue to go back to Yahweh's ways and keep the law. Because it was at that time that when we first went back in, we kept that Feast of Tabernacles.
Okay, all right. Listen to this. This is taken from a book entitled Great People of the Bible and How They Lived, and it's regarding the Persians. It says, the enlightened conquerors. Thus said Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. So he knew that Yahweh truly was the God of everything, and he had given him rulership over the earth. And he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem. This is quoted from Ezra chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. And that's exactly what he did, as you stated. He charged them to go back. He gave them all the precious things of the temple, and they went back, and finally a new temple was constructed. Now, tell us about Cyrus. What race was he? The Babylonians were Shemitic, like the Hebrews were. Tell us about Cyrus.
Well, this is when Cyrus, this is when the Gentiles became into rule. And what else? There was prophecy about Cyrus in Isaiah. And if you read Isaiah 44 and 28, Yahweh had already named Cyrus before he was even born.
Okay.
So he'd already had Cyrus in mind to do his works and bring his people back into Jerusalem and rebuild his temple. Let me read that for you.
Okay.
Isaiah chapter 44, 28. And that said of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasures, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt he build, and to the temple the foundation shall be laid. Thus says Cyrus to his thus says Yahweh to his anointed Cyrus, whose right hand have I held, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the lions of kings to open before him the two level gates, and the gate shall not be shut. And when I will go in before thee and make the crooked place straight, and break in pieces the gate of brass, and cut asunder the bar of iron. So it was already prophesied before our people even went into the Mede-Persian Babylonian Empire, that Cyrus was going to come and take that empire away from them, and he was going to be like a shepherd. You know, even though he was a Gentile.
Now, tell our audience who is a Gentile, because, you know, they may think, well, who's anybody that wasn't a Jew? Is that
well,
true?
The Gentiles are from the YaChov nations, the Europeans. So
Okay.
he was not a person of color.
Okay.
He was a Caucasian person. He was white. Okay. So Yahweh uses whom he chooses to use. So before Cyrus was born, he would already proclaim that he would be the shepherd to lead his people out of the Babylonian Empire and take them back into allow them to go back into Jerusalem and rebuild his temple. So he had a purpose before he was even born.
Okay.
And what it was Daniel's vision of the Mede-Persian Empire in the third year of the king of Belshazzar. You can read that in Daniel 8, 1 through 4. The Median Empire of Darius, it was two kings, Darius and Cyrus. Darius was the king of the Median, and Cyrus was Mede-Persians. So that's why you had on the ram two horns, because there were going to be two rulers to be ruling this particular empire.
Okay.
So with Cyrus coming in and Yahweh putting favor in his eyes for the Hebrew children, because it's all about us, that we would go back into our land and rebuild the land, and that way, that's how the temple was re-erected again.
Now, you mentioned that Cyrus and Darius, the Medes and the Persians, are who we call today the Russians and the Iranians. These were people of the Caucasian stock. Now, the importance of this is that this happened in 539 BC, and these were the first Europeans to ever rule the whole earth. Even before these last four empires, you had Egypt and Assyria to rule, and these were all people of color, the African races and also the Shemitic races. Nebuchadnezzar was a person of color who was a Shemite. But now you had this newcomer on the scene, 539 years before the birth of Christ. Now we have 2,000 years later. And Christ himself talks a lot about the times of the Gentiles. Tell me a little bit about that, since this is the beginning of the Gentile rule in 539 BC.
Well, you can pick that up in Luke 21, verse 24, and it says, and they shall fall by the sword, and of the sword shall be led away captives into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, to the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So with the beginning of the Mede-Persian Empire, this is the times of the Gentile. Until the times of the Gentiles are going to be fulfilled, and that they will have this reign over us.
Okay, and obviously the Europeans have ruled much longer than the other races. They've ruled now for almost 2,500 years. And that's the times that the prophet Daniel said that they would rule. Ladies, we have about a minute to go before our Around the World report, and I'd like to remind our audience that Signs of the Times will be producing a live show at NCCI at their open house, and this show will air at 3 o'clock on August 29th at NCCI, 3901A Covington Highway. We'd like to invite you out for the entire session of our open house, which will begin at 11:30 and end at 6 o'clock. It'll be a time of fun-filled events, food, lots of food, lots of prophecy, lots of information about the history that we're providing right now. And also we'll have a live band entitled Live Peach. So please come out and enjoy our open house with us on August 29th, beginning at 11:30. And now we're going to go to our Around the World report.
Hi, I'm Ruth Israel. Here is what is happening in the world in brief. Is this spot too hot for Western media? When the Russian army stormed into breakaway Chechnya in 1994, the Western media were already there and remained in the battle zone for the 2-year war. But Western journalists have been absent from the current bloodshedding between Russian forces and Islamic militants. The main threat to journalists is not bombs and bullets, but it is kidnapping. The government of Dresden strongly recommends foreign journalists to stay away from the area. Western news organizations, including the Associated Press, have relied on local reporters in Dresden and the Russian media reports to cover the conflict. And further, Chinese officials have warned the Clinton administration Beijing may be compelled to take military action to punish Taiwan for what Beijing sees as moves toward independence. According to the New York Times, Washington has warned privately that any military action by China against Taiwan would bring retaliation by the United States. In Asia, North Korea has threatened to make Japan pay a high price for what it described as a century of hostilities, and its repeated insistence it has the right to test fire rockets at will. The North Korean embassy in China wants Japan to apologize for colonizing Korea earlier this century for killing about 1 million people and enslaving millions, in addition to forcing over 200,000 Korean women to work as military sex slaves. Turning to the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Barak urges Syria to help reignite talks. Barak made an emotional appeal to Syrian President Assad to resume stalled peace talks and move together on the path that leads to peace and security. Barak urged Assad to quickly find a way to resume the negotiations, to start a determined journey to turn the vision of peace in the Middle East into a reality. This will hardly be a reality anytime soon. And turning to our nation, in Washington, the Pentagon has decided to issue a new strict guidelines intended to end abuses of the don't ask, don't tell policy, including limits on investigations of people in uniform who are suspected of homosexual activity. The new guidelines will require that troops receive anti-gay harassment training throughout their careers. The Pentagon felt the need to introduce the new guidelines due to the uproar over the death of a gay soldier last month at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We all have the obligation to respect one another, but when the military is forced to change its high standards because of the objections of a few, it would be a sad day for the many young men and women who choose to live morally straight. Also, a Catholic priest has been named a pastor despite fathering a child. A Roman Catholic priest was promoted to pastor of a church in Covington, Kentucky, even after officials learned he had a child with a married woman. Catholic priests are required to be celibate. What has always been typically known as a male gay disease, AIDS is moving rapidly into the heterosexual population, particularly in the African American or minority communities. Blacks, who make up 28% of Georgia's population, accounted for almost 3/4 of the state's newly reported AIDS cases in 1998. That's up 49% of the cases in 1990. The State Department of Human Resources reported that of the 1,335 AIDS cases reported, 976 of those cases were blacks. The statewide HIV Community Planning Council is focusing its education efforts this year on blacks ages 13 to 29 years of age who are users of injected drugs. And finally tonight, 4 proposed courses on the history of the Old and New Testaments were stricken from the Georgia State School Board agenda, pending a recommendation from the State Attorney General on whether the courses are constitutional. Supporters of the courses applauded State Representative Jeff Williams when he quoted, "Do not dismiss Jewish history or Bible history from our course catalog because of a few extremists. Several school board members, however, questioned the constitutionality of the course after hearing a Florida judge ordered a school district last year to throw out the Old Testament portion. At least 3 Georgia school districts are interested in teaching the courses based on materials developed by the North Carolina National Council on Bible Curriculum. This has been the Around the World Report and the Community Update.
Welcome back to Signs of the Times. For those of you just now joining us, our show tonight is entitled The Last 4 World Empires on the Earth. Many people believe that Christ's return is imminent. However, if you don't go back and hook up the prophecies of Daniel and the prophecies of the Revelator John in the New Testament, you won't know when to start looking for the Messiah's return. So we're dealing with what Daniel saw as the last 4 world empires upon the earth tonight, to see if in fact we've gone through all of this time period. I'm here to say that we haven't quite. We're almost there, but we haven't quite. John, you had some comments about Cyrus the Great of the Mede-Persian Empire before we go on.
When my sister Deborah was reading the scripture dealing about the prophecy of Cyrus coming even prior to his birth, Yahweh spoke on, when he spoke about Cyrus, he said, "My anointed."
Right.
And this was the first time he had ever mentioned the word anointed and attached it to a Gentile, another nation. But truly, Yahweh chooses who he will.
Correct.
And you know, the same way that people don't have a problem with the fact that he was a European and Yahweh chose him, is the same way that we shouldn't have a problem with the fact that Yahweh chose our people, the Hebrew Israelites, today known as Negroes, as his holy race of people. There's no, with Yahweh, he chooses whom he will, and we accept that as we will. And every group that he chooses has a purpose and has something to do. And at that time, you have to remember, color was an issue.
Right.
It wasn't until today's days that people have made color such an issue. And at that time, that wasn't a problem. But truly, Yahweh chooses who he will.
Well, praise Yah. That's the problem. The Gentiles, in order to suppress us and to oppress us, have made us feel inferior by the simple fact that our skin is dark. People not understanding that it's the Most High who's chosen our dark skin to be his holy people, and he's given us into their hands, and they have totally misused us. Tell us what was happening with the Hebrews during the Mede-Persian Empire, one of the significant events during that empire.
Well, during that time, Darius was the king, and he had some princes who were under him, and they were jealous of Daniel at this time and wanted to see how they could bring him down. So they had passed a decree that whoever would pray to any other god besides Darius within 30 days would be cast into the lion's den. And again, Yahweh always has a remnant that he will not bow the knee to Baal.
Correct.
And these Hebrews would not, just like Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel refused to bow down and pray to anyone else besides Yahweh. So they noticed that, and they sent to get Daniel and have him thrown into the lion's den. And they noticed, just like before, when Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were in the fiery furnace, when Daniel was in the lion's den, Yahweh sent an angel to shut up the lion's mouth so they would not touch Daniel. And Darius at this time, who didn't want this to happen, who was just going on the order of what the people wanted and what his princes wanted. He couldn't sleep during this time that Daniel was in the lion's den. He fasted. He couldn't eat or anything because he didn't want this to happen to Daniel. So when he went the next day and saw that Daniel, nothing had happened to him, he was rejoicing. And he in turn threw his princes into the lion's den, and his family and his children and his wife, and they were all eaten up. And that just shows that there's always a remnant. The Hebrews did not want to worship any other god besides Yahweh.
Exactly.
And Daniel began to prosper again.
And even us now, in our enemy's land here in this day, we should be just like Daniel did when he was in Babylon. He turned toward Jerusalem with his face toward the holy city of Jerusalem to pray to the Most High. And that's what they accused him of. And because the Medes and the Persians law, once the law was signed by the king, you couldn't revoke it. He had to throw Daniel in that lion's den. So we today get thrown in the lion's den quite often with our employers, because we will not worship anyone but the Most High. So we have to keep going. If that's our end, just like the brother said, then so be it. That's our end. But Yahweh protected them, and as long as we're doing His will, He'll protect us.
Yes, He will.
Most definitely. Let's move right along to the Grecian Empire, and I'd like to quote out of the book entitled "Great People of the Bible and How They Lived," and this is published by Reader's Digest. It says, the Greeks, bearers of a new culture. Even though Cyrus and Darius were Europeans, they were more Southern European. This is something different, these Greeks. It states, Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia opened the Eastern world to Western influence and began the Hellenistic Age. His army of Hellenes from Macedonia and Greece swept across Asia Minor and claimed an empire from Egypt to India by the time he was 31. And of course, the Grecians was considered on this image that you see on the screen now, the belly of brass. So again, 3 times down, brass definitely doesn't equal more than silver, and it definitely doesn't equal more than gold. But that's the empire of the Grecians, this belly of brass. It says, Greek became the international language as Hellenistic cities were built throughout the Near East. In Judea, as the Greeks called Yehuda, the Jews fought to maintain their faith and ideals in the face of Greek religion and worldly culture. This fight, led by the family of the Maccabees, was partly successful. Hellenism permeated Jewish society for many years. But first, tell me a little bit about Alexander the Great and what happened to his empire after his death, and then we'll go into some of the history with the Maccabees of our period.
Well, the Greek Empire, that was a really strong empire. They ruled from Greece all the way through India and, of course, our land. And Alexander the Great was the main force in that entire seizure. Now, Alexander the Great, the way that he ruled, he wasn't extremely harsh at that point. But his main thing to promote was Hellenism, just as you spoke on. He wanted to promote the ideas and the thoughts of the Greeks, so that everyone was going to be a Greek. And it was so much so because when he died, because he died very young, he died I think 32 or so. When he died, his 4 generals took over, and when his 4 generals took over, the empire wasn't as strong. So they weren't able to take over it in conjunction. They took over separately. So each one took over a separate land. Some took over Egypt. Some took over India. They took over different places. And in doing that, like I said, the Hellenism took place. Everything was Greek. Our language even began to turn. Whereas before we were speaking Hebrew or Aramaic, because previously when we were under rule of Cyrus, we began to speak Aramaic. And kind of left off from our Hebrew tongue. Now this time, neither were we speaking Hebrew nor Aramaic, and we had begun to start speaking Greek. And because of this, so many of our people were speaking Greek. We had the law even had to be transliterated into Greek. So that was when we got the Septuagint. And that was the Septuagint was the conversion thereof of our law. Now, I have something here that I want to read. It's coming out of Jews, God, and History. And it speaks a little bit about the Hellenization of the Jews. And it says it began inconspicuously. It says, first, it affected our language, our manners, and customs. It encroached upon the Jews' morals, ethics, and religion. First was a daytime breakthrough between 9 and 5 when when Jewish and Greek businessmen met in bazaars and coffee houses. The second took place after 5, when Jewish and Greek youths met in gymnasiums, theaters, and cabarets, because part of the Greek society was the theaters and the gymnasiums, and they were really big, as you know, with the Olympics and everything else. So under the impact of daily business associations, the Jews assumed Greek names for the same reasons that we have today, that we call ourselves by American names today. And so they changed their names. They spoke Greek for the same reason that we speak English today. They abandoned their traditional Jewish dress for the Greek tunic of this, for the same reason, again today. As you see, it's a circle here. And Greek words even crept into the Jewish religious writings. Even synagogues began to resemble the look of Grecian temples.
Wow.
So much so that they had recently, there was archaeological excavations in a former Greco-Roman outpost. It was brought to light that it was a Jewish synagogue, which was at first mistaken for a Grecian temple, simply because of the way that it was formed, the columns and the arches and everything that we know today to look Greek. So the Hellenization during this period was really rampant. So our people at this point were kind of turning our hearts, because when you do this much changing, you certainly at some point in time are going to do some changing going on with your God, of your customs, because part of their land and their culture was the worship of their gods. They had 4 feasts throughout the year. And you can combine that, and you can also change, you can compare that to today's lifestyle, because even if you're not a Christian or a religious person, everyone in America is very familiar with Christmas. Many people who are not religious and don't call themselves religious at all deal with Christmas. They buy presents because it's the thing to do. Simply because it's how our society is set up. And this is what happened to our people then. Of course, it's caused us problems.
As it always does. And again, that's the whole reason for these last 4 world empires, to whip our behinds. The nations have been a strap to Israel since the time of Nebuchadnezzar and to this present day. And that's what people don't understand. And that's why it's going to be such a glorious thing to be redeemed finally from this 2,500 years of captivity. We've shown you some pictures of Alexander the Great, and you saw another bas relief of the gymnasium scene. With the Hebrews and the Greeks, and this is where you get your sports today, and our people still participating with little or no clothes. Of course, back then the Greeks actually were naked, and this rubbed off on our people. We weren't involved in things like this before, but quickly we were Hellenized, and what you saw is a fusion of the Grecian way or Western civilization with biblical philosophy. And what you have today is that same Western civilization built upon the foundation of the Hebrew Israel, our Bible, the Ten Commandments especially. And it's sad because the culture of the Greeks have run over. We're still dealing with the gods and goddesses of the Greeks that were the same gods and goddesses of all the other nations, just the names have changed. Jana brought up a good point about the Septuagint, because we talked about that on the show, about the names of the Most High, because in that first translation that our people made, the name of the Most High was still written as the tetragrammaton, YHWH, all around those Grecian letters, which lets us know we should still be calling on that holy name today, even though we speak English. Tell us a little bit about our people and the degradation of our people under the Syrians, or who was called at that time the Seleucids.
Okay, during that time, there was a ruler called Antiochus, and during his reign, let me read a little bit about that. In 170 BC, Antiochus profaned the temple and enslaved great numbers of the inhabitants. And on December the 25th BC, 168, Antiochus offered a swine upon the great altar and erected an altar to Zeus / Jupiter. This is the desolation of Daniel 8 and 13, the type of the final abomination of desolation in Matthew 24. The temple was forbidden and the people compelled to eat swine's flesh. So during this time, our people were going through a lot of changes. They were turning away from Yahweh and serving other gods. And this is just a prime example of how the Greeks were turning our hearts away, and how we defiled Yahweh's altar by putting a pig on the altar, because they know that's an abomination to us, So during this time, our people went through a lot of changes. They came up with the Olympics during the Greek time. There was a lot of nudity going on during this time. All the abominable things that Yahweh spoke about in his laws, our people were turning into. So we can see why we were put unto these 4 beasts, because we were not doing what Yahweh, assigned us to do. We were not following his laws. So from that, we came with all these abominable things.
Okay, hopefully we can pick this picture up. And this is another vase of the the Greeks, and their worship, they're actually sacrificing a sow on the altar at this point. Now, again, the pig was a common sacrificial animal for the Europeans. It still is. If you look at your table on Christmas Day, you'll see some ham or something there. It's still the most sacrificed animal for their holy days. And again, when you tie up that whole Christmas Day thing, you're going back to Zeus, which is now called Jupiter by the Romans, now called Jesus by the Englishmen, I guess you would say. But this is the god that they're worshiping, and they still use the swine as one of their famous, I guess, dainties during that time period. Now, tell us a little bit about the ending or the climax of that period. It was the Maccabees who decided, nope, I'm not going to eat that swine, and I'm not going to bow to your god Zeus. And they became rebels, and they fought for a long time until they finally did cleanse the temple. It was cleansed about 3 years later, actually, on that same day, so-called Christmas Day. We have a little bit of time left, and I have not invited our audience to join us tonight, but please feel free to give us a call to interact with us at 770-559-2999. That's 770-559-2999. Ladies, let's move on into the Roman Empire, because we've got to get into that because we're still under the Roman rule. Now, according to our depiction of the Romans, they were the legs of iron. And then also, we're living in the time of the toes right now. Tell us about the legs of iron, this Roman Empire. What does the scripture say about the Roman Empire?
Well, you can pick up the Roman Empire, again, just like you pick up everything else throughout the scriptures. But the Roman Empire in particular, you have to remember that was in the point where Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 A.D. The mass execution, and again, the deportation, the desolation of our land and everything else. This was also the time when Yeshua was born, and during the time where he died. He was under this rule in addition. What did the prophet Daniel say about this fourth beast? It was different from the rest. What he said was that this land, this particular people, would break down. Let me read this. Daniel 7:20 and 23.
Okay.
The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it into pieces. And truly, this is the one that we're living under presently. And truly, this is exactly what they've done. They've destroyed the land and the air and the sea. There are so many different things that are going on. Presently, I was reading in the paper locally that over near the Panthersville area, there's a creek that is called, I think it's a river. It's called South River. All in that area, what has happened, the county of Fulton, or actually Atlanta, has their waste. Their waste is put into a creek, and they know that it's going to overflow. It always overflows every time there's a large rain. Well, this area where it stops up is right here in South DeKalb, and it overflows into the South River. So the South River goes in there, and of course it gets into, it's total pollution. It stinks, and we're talking, when I speak on pollution, I'm speaking raw sewage.
Right.
So it's disgusting.
And this is a worldwide issue.
Right, and this is just something local I want to mention, but obviously, like you said, throughout the world, under this rule, they're polluting this land.
We have a caller on the line. Caller, thanks so much for holding. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh,
Fine, thank you.
I don't want to take y'all too far from the subject, but I have my girlfriend here, and I was explaining to her a few months ago how I don't celebrate Christmas and stuff like that. She kind of didn't believe me, and I wanted to explain to her further how it started and how it got to where it is today.
Okay.
If you could do that for me, please, and I'll hang up there.
I guess the first thing is pick up Jeremiah chapter 5, and let's read that. John, if you will.
Sure. Just 1 second so I can find it. Okay. Now, we know the common things that we do or people do in Christmas. One of the things, the most famous things, is dealing with the Christmas tree. Now, Yahweh gave us prophets that spoke on that. Jeremiah chapter 10, I'll start with verse 1. Hear ye the word which Yahweh speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. So again, that's dealing with the astrology and the stars and planets and so forth. Verse 3, for the customs of the people are vain, For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of a workman with an axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. And this is speaking of that Christmas tree. And today, we personally may not go out as a workman and cut down a tree, but we know when we go into these local lots and there are trees sitting there for us, someone has, truly. And what do? We bring it home and deck it in the exact same terminology, decking it with silver and gold. So this here initially, just from that point of view, tells us that Christmas is wrong. When you get into the scriptural parts, other scriptural parts, I should say, about the fact Yeshua, our King, Christ, was not even born in the wintertime. He was born in the spring or summertime. And you can get that from common sense, from the fact that he was outdoors in a manger. And at this time, when it was cold, they even brought the sheep and so forth in, but they were still out during this time. When you follow the scriptures even more so, if you do the counting of the months and so forth, you'll find that if he were born in that December time frame, he would have been born, I think, 6 months premature, which would have made him 3 months old. I don't know if many people who survived being born at 3 months old.
That's that period.
It continues. There's plenty of scriptural background that will tell you that surely Christmas is not about Christ, has nothing to do with Christ. And give us a call, and we can give more information on that.
Anyone have anything else to add to that? Okay. All right, yeah, I mean, all you have to do is open up any encyclopedia. It tells you exactly that the customs of December 25th has to do with the Saturnalia, which is a festival of the Romans, and it also has to do with Mithra, an ancient god of the Persians. So when you deal with all of these ancient customs on that day, what the Christians did to try to appease the heathens was to allow Christ's birthday to be celebrated on the day that they already celebrated all these pagan rites. The rites haven't changed. I mean, the rites from giving gifts to, drinking a lot of alcohol to all of that, and worship and dealing with that tree, it's been customs way before Christ was ever born. So it's how you want to deal with it. We need to go ahead and move along into this Roman Empire a bit, because, again, we've stated that we are in this empire. Now, we know that the Roman Empire failed to exist with the rulership of the Caesars in 476 AD. But what the toe symbolizes on the great image is the revival of this beast, this Roman Empire. And that would last 3.5 years. Now, we know that that's the time we're waiting on. We're waiting on Europe to become one country again, a one world empire again. They have already amassed their army. They're already moving toward a one world currency. When we get a king that all the other races and nations will give their power to, and they set up this particular kingdom as the kingdom, and everyone else will have to use their money and speak their language, etc., then we know that Christ's return is 3.5 years later. We haven't gotten to that point yet, because the world is still being run by these toes, these fragmented kingdoms right here. We've got to get to where there's one head again, like the Caesars were in Rome before. That's called the revival of the Roman Empire. That's what we're waiting on. And then our Messiah, that Hebrew brother, is going to come, and he's going to return to redeem the Hebrew Israelites. That's his first job. And return us to our land and recompense this final empire, this revived world empire, who is going to just try to destroy our people, lock, stock, and barrel, in a short period of time. Ladies, we have about 8 seconds. So we're going to end it tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Call us at 404-298. Forgot the number. Give us a call anyway. NCCI. Thanks so much for joining us, and good night.
Hear, O Israel, the Adonai our Elohim is one, Yahweh. This commentary is entitled Four World Kingdoms Foretold. Millions know that we are living in awesome, frightening times. There are many books concerning Bible prophecy portraying various scenarios for the end of the world. It is impossible, however, to understand the end time scenario without understanding prophecy, especially the books of Daniel and Revelation. The prophecies in these two books were written in symbols and metaphors. What is often misunderstood is that the Bible interprets its own symbols. The meaning is not of anyone's private interpretations, which is written in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses Verse 21. The following charts depict Daniel and John's prophecies of the last 4 world empires to reign upon the earth. In the 600 years between the 2 prophecies of the book of Daniel and Revelation, the 4 beast empires that Daniel had seen had all come and gone. The fourth, Rome was still in power during John's prophecy in 96 AD. 2,000 years have passed since John's prophecy, and we are now living in the time of the last effort to revive the 4th beast, the Holy Roman Empire. Today, it's being called the New World Order. This will be the final 3.5 years of the rule of the Gentiles, or the European nations. The times of the Gentiles began in 539 BC, as Cyrus was the first European to rule the earth. According to the scriptures, European rulership would last a total time of 2,520 years. The beast of Revelation 13 describes the revived 4th beast that would rule the world in the last 3.5 years on the earth, as described in John's vision. He saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon, Lucifer, gave him the power and his seat and great authority, written in Revelation 13, 1 and 2. In Daniel 7, we find exactly these same symbols described, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and a dreadful, terrible beast with great iron teeth, 7 heads and 10 horns.